I was surprised, not because I was surprised by what Gruden said and that he said it, but more that I know that he is very popular. People like him. He's kind of known in the business, guy's guy, and the owner likes him a lot.
Happy Saturday and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, October 16th. I need to check that. Is that right, Val? I don't know. We're in the middle of October, Val. And so that means the weather's supposed to be nice. The state fair is going on here in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I am. And, you know, we're hurtling towards the holidays. But the world is still crazy. So you saw the montage coming in, the last clip there, William Roden, who's a very fine sports columnist, talking about the Jon Gruden, who used to be the coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Val, we're going to talk about that and a whole bunch more, but let's do a setup. Let me play some clips about Jon Gruden and why he's no longer the coach of the Las Vegas Raiders.
Judy, these emails show Gruden repeatedly using racist, anti-gay, and misogynistic language. They date back to 2010, when Gruden was an analyst for ESPN. He rejoined the Raiders as head coach in 2018. As reported, Gruden was communicating with, among others, Bruce Allen, who was the one-time president of the Washington football team. In one exchange, Gruden used a racist stereotype to describe DeMaurice Smith, head of the NFL Players Association and who's black. Using an anti-gay slur, Gruden complained when in 2014, an NFL team drafted Michael Sam, the first openly gay player. Carl Nassib, who's the first active NFL player to come out as gay, plays for the Raiders, Gruden's former team.
If it was just been DeMaurice Smith and the racism, maybe he could have walked with that. But you're calling the commissioner a slur. He checked every single box of bigotry and racism. And in this NFL, where they're talking about, diversity and inclusion, he just could not survive that. So I was surprised that they did it so quickly. I was not surprised at what he said. Who did he write these emails to? Who's on the receiving end? And what was their reaction? I really would hope the Players Association will force the NFL to give us more information. Who are these people? And what was their reaction? Because, Gruden was enabled. And I want to find out who these enablers were. It's one thing to get rid of Gruden. But when I refer to Grudenism, I'm talking about that sort of sensibility that he represents, which I feel is alive and well, not just in the NFL, but as we've seen the past few years throughout our country.
Okay, Val, so there's a lot in there. Y'all black folks have big lips. He don't like gay people. Women shouldn't be involved in the NFL, blah, blah, blah. A whole lot of stuff. Jon Gruden, though, used to be one of the co-hosts of Monday Night Football at one point. He had a very popular show on ESPN where he would bring in quarterbacks and assess quarterbacks, and people would follow that. He seems very affable, likable, kind of guy. So Val Atkinson, why is Jon Gruden no longer the coach of the Las Vegas Raiders?
Well, in researching some emails, they found all of these things that you talked about and that was shown in your clips. But one of the stories that's not getting enough attention, as far as I'm concerned, is why were the emails being looked at in the first place? And that was because there was some sexual harassment allegations by many female workers with the organization called the Washington football team. And they were investigating that. And through the process, they came up with all of these horrible, horrible emails by Jon Gruden, some of them going back as far as 2007. It showed Gruden in a different light than many people had seen him. But I think Keyshawn hit the nail on the head more so than anybody else with the show up front and First Take. Keyshawn played for Jon Gruden. And he said, as Keyshawn likes to talk in a blunt way, he said, Jon Gruden was a fraud.
I would say this, Molly, when I was playing, I didn't say anything. Stephen A. remember when I was deactivated from the team and essentially sent home for 6-7 weeks, I didn't say anything. I said, hey, I'm happy. I won a Super Bowl. I had my time. It's time to move on. I didn't get into it. I let everybody else just say what they say. And then I finally said, man, this dude is a fraud. Y'all don't seem to understand. He's selling you on something and you're buying it. He's been doing that for years.
He said Jon Gruden would talk to you with a smile on his face, and as soon as you leave the room, he'd cut you up like a dagger, with a dagger, a knife or whatever. And he did that to everybody. He was an equal opportunity abuser. So this guy played for Jon Gruden. He knew what kind of person he was, a guy that you could never trust and don't believe in. And he had harsh and bad things to say about everybody. He was saying Jon Gruden only cared about one person, and that was himself. But he had a lot of people fooled. So when all of these emails started to surface, of course, you've got to do something. You can't just go on and say, okay, that's okay to be misogynistic and homophobic and racist and all those other kinds of things.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Well, Gruden had the trifecta. He was all of that, right? He was misogynistic, racist, and homophobic. Let me play you one other clip that's, I think, informative. This is Jason Whitlock, who's on some of the Fox Sports shows. He was on Bill O'Reilly the other day apologizing for Jon Gruden. This is a black man apologizing for Jon Gruden.
Bill, all of this is a byproduct of a culture that has gone completely secular. And so forgiveness has been eliminated from American culture.
No doubt about it.
And we have a satanic secular culture that believes in retribution and vengeance. And what William Roden is talking about is retribution and vengeance for anybody associated with Jon Gruden. And
now, Val, Whitlock and I don't see eye to eye on nothing. But there are black folks out there who have been apologists for Gruden. Not a lot, but you have this guy. And I think part of it is a culture of sports in America. I want to deal with that just a little bit because we got another sports story I want to deal with right on the heels of this about Kyrie Irving. But the way Americans look at sports is kind of out of whack. Now, I played, you played, we were fairly good athletes, I would say. We've coached, right? And you still currently coach. I still do some consulting and coaching or whatever. But I've noticed that the relationship between white coaches and black athletes is different. Black coaches tend to be more mentor type, making sure that you get your way through life or whatever. And white coaches tend to be, they look at you as a commodity. I won't say that all of them, but it happens too frequently. I think Jon Gruden is sort of the typification of that, right? Is that like Keyshawn Johnson was saying, is that he could talk to you one way and then really disdain you in the next breath as soon as you walk out of the room. Talk to me about this relationship between athletes. And one athlete that's sticking out in my mind in particular right now, former athlete, is Herschel Walker, for example. That there are people who are willing to cast a vote for him only because he is a supporter of Donald Trump, but he's a supporter of Donald Trump for what some of those messed up psychological reasons that, black athletes start to think that they're above race. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. It all starts with the notion, or the fact rather, that a lot of these white coaches are void of understanding of Black culture. Now they are thrown into this pit that these are the people you got to work through to get the job done that you are being paid to do. And so they do the only thing they know. They think that Blacks will react the same way whites do with certain motivational stimulus. And too many white players will react a certain way when you challenge their manhood. But when you challenge African Americans' manhood, you may not get that same type of reaction. And that's just one small example of how they don't know because they've spent their whole life being segregated from the Black community. So they don't know and understand the people that they are actually coaching. And they do, in fact, now like your word, they do, in fact, see them as a commodity. This is something that I can use to improve my status with my boss by winning football games. But you should never put that above life itself. And you brought me to one of my favorite guys in this conversation, Ed, Booger McFarland. He is still with us. He talks on ESPN and a lot of other places. And he is an apologist for a lot of white people who don't understand the Black experience. And he thinks football gets a pass. If you are doing things to promote the game of football and help your team win, it's okay not to support Black causes and Black issues when you should be doing it. So there's a lot of Booger McFarlands out there. There are a lot of other kind of people that really hurt the whole African-American experience in sports more so than it ever could help.
Yeah. I just wish that, we hadn't gone down that road of convincing our kids that it was somehow better to go to Alabama than it was better to go to Alabama State or go to Carolina instead of going to Fayetteville State, to ply your trade in sport. Because the reality is, Val, very few of those kids end up in the NFL or NBA or Major League Baseball or wherever. And so the experience that you could have could be better if you went to a HBCU, for example, to play a sport. Then on the professional level, obviously we know it's all about money. The NFL can play lift every voice at every game from now into in perpetuity. If there are people in the NFL like Jon Gruden, and it's all over the place. Jon Gruden is just, one that got caught. You still are going to see the same thing. I like to see the NFL have people in executive positions or Black people owning teams. But Val, here's the reality, and we'll wrap this up. To own an NFL team, you have to be a billionaire. It's an exclusive club of 30 some people, and they can keep anybody out they want to, or bring people in if they want to. Jon Gruden was a liability, so they let him go because he also talked about the commissioner. He may have gotten a pass had he not gone that far. And I'll leave it at that. So let's talk about another sports story, Val. Kyrie Irving. Hold on a second. Let me play a clip of Kyrie talking about why he doesn't want to be vaccinated.
I'm going to give up this game for a vaccine mandate or staying unvaccinated. Don't believe any of that shit. Like really be aware. What would you do? If you felt uncomfortable going into the season when you were promised that you would have exemptions or that you didn't have to be forced to get the vaccine. This wasn't an issue before the season started. This wasn't something that I foresaw coming where I prepared for it. And, I had a chance to strategize on what was going to be best for me and my family. I came into the season thinking that I was just going to be able to play ball.
So Val, Kyrie goes on the Twitterverse and talks about, it's a personal choice. It's between him and whatever he thinks he should be allowed to play, yada, 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 yada. Now, everybody's not on his side. I'll play a clip in a little bit of Jalen Rose, who has a differing opinion from Mr. Irving. Talk to me about Kyrie. Now that I'm gonna ding you on one thing, Val, before I let you talk. He did go to Duke. Now he only played in 8 games, but he did go there. So let's start there. Talk to me about Kyrie.
Well, for the sake of full disclosure, I got to say, I've been a Duke fan since 1983, long before Kyrie Irving was ever thought about. But it was disappointing to me as a fan of the basketball team there that he would do this. But Ed, I sensed this. I felt this was coming a couple of years ago when he was first trying to explain why he thought the Flat Earth Society was okay. I knew there was something going on right then. And now he's coming out with this thing, talking about it's an individual issue. He's not a role model. People should be able to do what they want. He hadn't thought it through very carefully. And I'm thinking that there's some things and some people that are getting into Kyrie Irving's decision-making process before it is complete, because he is really coming up with some doozies here that indicate that he hasn't thought them through very well. And I don't even want to argue the nuances of the statement that he made and whether they are true or not. We all know what that is. I'm more concerned about where this guy is as far as his mental health is concerned. I think he's an affable young man. He's definitely a great ball player and all these other kind of things. We've just got to do whatever we can to get the other parts of Kyrie Irving straight. That's his mental attitude about things that are critically important, such as being vaccinated and encouraging others to do the same, and understand that individualism doesn't trump the whole issue of saving humanity, saving your species. This is something that could wipe us out. And people are talking about individual choice. You don't, as a person, you don't have an individual choice as to whether or not we save the species called Homo sapien. That's not your choice. You're not that big, you know? And I think that's one of the avenues that we should start walking down and talking to these non-vaxxers about. You know, having a choice is one thing, but making a decision that impacts me and mine and ours is a whole different piece. You don't have that choice.
Yeah, you know, Val, that brings up a good point. I just often wonder how we arrived at having this self-assessment that we're so important that, for example, that the government will put out a vaccine on purpose to hurt me. You know, what to what end would that help any of us? COVID is around the world, but we've made it so American, which is what we do, what Americans do, right? It's all about America. It's all about what Donald Trump says, or some nutty doctor that gives up to say you should try, whatever treatment instead of the vaccine. Which brings me to another point. I'll put a pin in Kyrie then, because we just need to do an intervention, I think, with Kyrie. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about COVID real quick before the segment ends. The numbers in terms of overall cases, new cases, has gone down. However, deaths haven't gone down because they always trend down later, right? Because you get COVID and you may not die until 30 days later. So you get diagnosed with it and then you die. So those numbers are going to stay up for a while. Now we're into getting the booster shots. I had Moderna, so I'm not able to get it yet. I think you had Pfizer. Is that right?
I did. And I've had my booster.
And you've had your booster. Have you heard talk amongst, your cohort of people that you deal with? Is there still some reluctance between now about the booster, or are people talking about it at all?
Yeah, there are some, Ed, and it's the same people who were what I call the non-vaxxers in the beginning. They come up with every little piece of advanced news or recommendations about COVID. They have a anecdotal type of message that they want to get out there to tell you why it shouldn't be that way or why you shouldn't participate with them. And they're doing this whole thing about the booster the same way. Some of them have even taken on the title of being some type of epidemiologist or whatever, they want to spot out all of these polysyllabic words to let you know that they understand what's going on and they've heard this and they listened to this broadcast and read these notes. But the bottom line is this: they don't want to do it because they think it takes away from their individualism, their choice, and their king, Mr. Trump, says that that's a no-no. So you can't be supportive of Donald Trump and be a super duper anti-coronavirus guy that wants to wear masks and have a mandated wearing of masks and mandated vaccinations and firing people if they don't comply. You can't be a Trumper and go that route. So that's where a lot of them are. And it's a shame that it's hurting a lot of the rest of us, even some people who don't give a dog about Donald Trump, like people in the rainforest, people in Africa, people in China and Russia and all around the world. Their first thought is not Donald Trump, but you are impacting them when you make these crazy decisions.
Yeah.
This is a global pandemic.
It's a global pandemic. And you know what? That's a good place to put a pin in it, Val, because when we come back, I do want to talk about, I hate doing this, but we're going to talk about Donald Trump. We're going to talk about inflation and how it's tied to this COVID epidemic and so on and so forth. So we got a bunch of stuff to talk about. On the way out, I'm going to play a clip of Jalen Rose talking about Val's boy, Kyrie Irving. And then we'll be back in just a minute. You watch the deal.
In particular, for Black people, I'm going to just cut right to the chase. So, and rightfully so, in the United States of America, we've gained and garnered a distrust for a lot of public service officials, in particular law enforcement and the medical profession. So I understand, just off muscle memory and off of our history, there are a lot of us that are really hesitant as it relates to things we hear and learn about with science and medicine and things of that nature. I had a grandfather, Big Daddy, who didn't want to go to a hospital. And one of his reasons why is at a time he grew up in the United States of America, his relationship was clearly different with the people in the hospital that did not look like him. But this is what I want to say about this topic. Kyrie Irving is not a victim either way. He's not being attacked either way. If he chooses not to get vaccinated, and again, that's his choice, he will still get 50% of his salary this year, which is around $18 million, and he remains unvaccinated, and that's okay. But whether he's vaccinated or unvaccinated, in this case, being unvaccinated does not make him a hero.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jacqueline Walters. I've been a practicing OBGYN for 23 years. When my patients ask me whether they should get vaccinated against COVID-19, I tell them yes. If you're trying to become pregnant now or plan to try in the future, you can get a COVID-19 vaccine. There's no evidence that any vaccine, including COVID-19 vaccine, causes fertility problems. I send my patients to the CDC website to get reliable information at www.cdc.gov.
Chuck Grassley has my complete and total endorsement for re-election. Chuck.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
They love you. Okay. Want to say anything?
Yes. I was born at night, but not last night. So if I didn't accept the endorsement of a person that's got 91% of the Republican voters in Iowa, I wouldn't be too smart. I'm smart enough to accept that endorsement.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. And on the way in, unfortunately, you had to see Donald Trump. He was in my other hometown of Des Moines, Iowa, last weekend with Chuck Grassley, the octogenarian senator from up there. Val, I'll tell you a Grassley story. It seemed like every time I was flying back to North Carolina when I was in Des Moines, on Monday mornings, I would catch a flight from Dulles to, on Fridays. I would always run into him in the airport because he would be flying from DC to Iowa, because he would always spend his weekends in Iowa for the most part whenever he could. And I would always see him in the airport because I would be getting on the plane. The plane turned around and would go from Des Moines to Dulles, and I would fly back to North Carolina for the weekend. So we crossed paths all the time. And I remember one night we were in the airport and it was a really bad snowstorm. And so we got stuck in the airport. So I had to sit in the lounge area because you couldn't even get a car to get you to a hotel or home. So most people just sat in the airport for a while. And I got a chance to talk to him. Really interesting guy. Now, Grassley criticized Donald Trump after the 1-6, and he said it was, not right in his fault. But you just saw this video, Val. Grassley is up at this rally in Des Moines as if he is a supporter of Donald Trump. He's 80-some years old. He's been in the Senate forever. Why does he need Donald Trump to stay in office? Because that's the way it seems to be. Explain that one.
Well, those people who think like Grassley and others did have convinced themselves that if they want to remain in office, if they want to continue their political career, first thing first, they must win the Republican primary. They have convinced themselves that it is impossible to win a Republican primary if you are 180 degrees from Donald Trump. They have convinced themselves of that. They haven't even thought it through beyond that. They haven't thought it through in saying, this is a purple state or this is a pink state instead of a deep red state or whatever it happens to be. And I may win the primary with the Republicans, but there's no way I can win a general election with these ideas that I must embrace in a primary election. They don't think that far. They're just thinking, first thing first, let me get through the primary. Because if I don't echo exactly what Donald Trump is saying, they're going to finance somebody to run against me in the primary, and my political career is over. That's what's motivating them to mimic and parrot whatever Trump says, whatever he wants them to do. So it's not logical. There's no reasoning in it. It's just a one thing that they've decided, I got to get on first base. There's no way I can round the bases and get home without getting to first base first. That's the first thing I've got to do. I'm not going to kill myself and say, I want to get home So I'm not going to first base because that's terrible. No, well, you're not getting home if you don't go to first base.
Right.
That's their logic. They've reasoned it that way, Ed, and reasonable people like yourself, and I like to put myself in that position sometimes as well. We know that that is asinine. It is impossibly stupid.
Yeah.
But that's the position they've taken.
Well, let's talk about, the whole Donald Trump still out on the hustings and still out there, on the stump. He's never, ever stopped. And it's either he's going to run in 24 or he just needs money because he's a huckster and he's doing this out to keep his name and keep his businesses alive. But the danger here is that what he's saying is that voting doesn't matter unless you're voting for him specifically, right? Isn't that the message, real message, if you peel back what he's saying, Val?
Yeah, well, that's what it boils down to. He's come out with some language that basically says, if these people don't embrace the idea that the election was stolen in 2020, then it doesn't matter if you vote for him or not. You, in this case, meaning Republicans. And he's basically told them that if you don't support me in getting Biden out of office and putting me back in and admitting that they stole the election, if you don't support that, then you don't deserve our support. That is a real conundrum for Republicans running for office. They were already going to have a problem in a general election. And now he's putting this out, that they've got to take a position that goes against what protocol and what everything has tradition has said about who won the election in 2020. They've got to go against that publicly or he won't support them. I think the door is open now for Democrats and other people like the Lincoln Project people and people of that nature to come in and start saying, okay, guys, it's time to take off the stupid mask. It's time to wake up a little bit. We still have the door open for you to come back into the sanity room if you so desire and choose to do so. And I think Trump may be wishing he hadn't gone down this road at some point.
Well, I hope that's the case, but let's talk about voting though, period. A lot of places are having municipal elections coming up, or they're in the middle of it. They're already doing early voting. There are some, you talked about primaries. Primaries are going to be right around the corner for a number of offices. Here in North Carolina, in Durham County, which is part of the Research Triangle, I know tomorrow on your show Connections, you have the head of elections in Durham County, North Carolina, on the program tomorrow. So if you get a chance, folks, listen to that. In Durham County, they have been getting some pressure from the Freedom Caucus or whatever these folks are calling themselves, saying they want to take a look at the voting machines in Durham. Do you have any sense of how Durham County is going to respond to that, and why in the world would anybody decide that they need to look at voting machines in Durham County? Is this part of a national kind of push to always go to counties where there's a lot of Black people and accuse them of some kind of voting fraud?
It is a national strategy, Ed, and the purpose is to sow seeds of doubt wherever they can about honest, free, and fair elections. They know they can't win them anymore. And so they want to sow seeds of doubt. That's one more step on the road to eliminating this thing that we call democracy and replacing it with something that they can win. Because the way the rules are written right now, they will be hard pressed to win very many elections going forward because they can't expand their tent. So in pursuing all of this, I had a conversation with Derek Boyne, who is the director of the Durham County Board of Elections, when I was asking if he would mind being a guest on the show tomorrow. And he talked about this during the interview setup process. And he was saying that under no circumstances will the county of Durham or the city or whatever turn over voting machines and those kind of things to any group because it invalidates the whole process once you've done that. There's a thing that we used to call chain of custody when you're talking about the courts and criminal matters and evidence and that sort of thing. But it applies here as well when you're talking about the ballot moving from the hand of the voter through a machine and then being viewed and counted by some other people that are legally authorized to do such. Anything else that comes into that system to try to do anything could invalidate that whole process. And that's what they want, these outside people. They want to throw shade on everything that is done so that they can come back and have their number one hawker, Donald Trump, say, it's invalid. It wasn't done properly. It's a fraud. And they want people to not trust that and go to some system where Donald Trump can appoint himself president for life, I guess.
Well, so that brings me to the next part of this is the whole redistricting thing. I got a clip right here I want you to take a look at. This is talking about North Carolina redistricting.
The room, the world able to watch each edit on each computer live.
That's not full transparency. I honestly don't know what full transparency would be.
It's only transparent to a point. Lawmakers in Raleigh started drawing new district maps Wednesday for the General Assembly and the U.S. House. Republicans control the General Assembly and ultimately what maps get approved. The state will add a 14th seat in Congress due to population growth as both parties fight for control in next year's election. Dr. Michael Bitzer at Catawba College says he expects a legal battle.
The past 40 years worth of history tells us anything. North Carolina redistricting will go from the legislature to the lawyers.
So Val, I picked North Carolina. I could have picked Texas. I could have picked Pennsylvania, anywhere. I happen to live in North Carolina. We got people who look at us from different places in the country and around the world. But I picked North Carolina because a lot of the fight over redistricting over the last decade in the Supreme Court has been about North Carolina. And in North Carolina, it appears to be going to do the same thing it did 10 years ago when they had a chance to. The Republicans were in charge and there was a different regime in a guy named David Lewis, who's from the county where I'm from Harnett County, who's now a convicted criminal who led the redistricting at the time. It's clear, Val, from the clip there that the Republicans think we're stupid, that they have a secret sauce in the background where they're going to create all these districts that make no sense to anybody except to them. And they want to say that they're being transparent. Talk to me about the redistricting process and why it's so fraught and why you can take it and manipulate to whatever effect you want. And there's hardly anything you can do about it.
Well, first of all, that's why the whole census taking process is so important, that everybody participates. Because when the census is being taken, the count deals with people living in the United States, not just citizens, people. So when we start taking the census and figuring out how many people are where, that's important to determine which state loses or gains any representation in the House of Representatives. And it appears that North Carolina is going to gain one seat this year. We'll go from 13 to 14. That's because of the census. Now, everything has to be redrawn then. And even if you weren't gaining or losing a seat, the lines have to be redrawn because people move around, and each county doesn't have the same population that it had 10 years ago. So because of that, you allow the legislature to come in and redraw the lines, as it were. Now, they have a system, it's called a CAD system, which I'm sure you know about that in your IT business. And they input data into that system to tell it what to look for and how to go about identifying voters and people and citizens. And they can instruct the system to put all Black people in one district, or put Hispanics or whites or whatever. It can do anything it wants, as long as it abides by the rules that are set up. And the rules that are set up is that once the total population of the United States is determined, they divide that by 435, the number of voting members of the House of Representatives, and they come up with a number, say 700 and some thousand or whatever. That's the number of people you need in one district to have one representative. Now, where these people live or whatever is not a big thing. The only thing it says, addition to that, it must be a contiguous district. You can't have it broken up into several different pieces. As long as it's contiguous, as long as it meets 100% of whatever number that is, that's fine. In the state level, you have a 10% variance there that you can play with, but not on the federal level. It has to be exact. So whoever is in power in the state legislature, they get to determine how these new districts are going to look. And I can tell you that right now, if the North Carolina districts don't heavily favor Republicans, I can be bought for $1. I'm telling you, that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's no question. And right now, we have 13 districts, and we have 8 Republicans and 5 Democrats. And when we come out with 14, I expect it to be somewhere on the order of 10 and 4, or maybe 9 and 5 at best.
Yeah.
But I look more like 10 and 4 is what I expect.
And that's what most of the pundits are saying, Val, and that puts us in a very tenable position, though, for Nancy Pelosi to maintain her leadership in the House, because this is not going to only be in North Carolina. It's going to be in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Everybody's doing this redistricting at the same time, and most of them have these partisan people who do the redistricting. You know what? I hear some music, Val, so that means we need to take a break. When we come back, I want you to talk to me about inflation. I want to talk about a school district down in Texas called South Lake that's having some problems about which books you can read and all kind of stuff. And then I want to end up with the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, who is maybe the craziest person ever to win elected office in North Carolina. So we'll take a break. We'll be right back after this message.
Before your donation, please make sure to eat a healthy meal and drink plenty of water. If you're feeling nervous, please express that to the Red Cross staff. They will calm you down and walk you through the entire process. When you come in, you can listen to music on your headphones or watch something on your phone. This will help take your mind off the process and get you through your donation. You can even bring a friend or family member with you to donate. Close your eyes, breathe slow, and think about something happy, like the life that could be impacted by your donation. Take your time after the donation to eat a snack, drink some water, and know that this small amount of time can make a lasting impact on someone else.
Well, there's no question that the inflation we saw over the summer was heavily driven, almost 3/4, by things like used cars, new cars, rental cars, return to normal in travel, and the like. What you're seeing today in the headline numbers, of course, is a lot on food and energy, some of that being driven by supply chain. I think we're actually in the part of the process now on the core inflation numbers where you're actually seeing some step back. You'll see airline prices come back down as Delta came up. You're seeing some of the car prices come down. And that's covering up, I think, some increase and some broadening of the inflation numbers, to other areas. So I do think there's risk on the inflation side, and I'm watching that very carefully.
And welcome back to our final segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. We've been talking about a lot of stuff. We started out talking about sports, Jon Gruden, Kyrie Irving, how coaches view African-American players who are under their leadership. I think Val and I know for sure that a lot of those coaches don't respect them as human beings, and they want them to just play ball and shut up and make them a bunch of money. We talked about COVID. We talked about our past president, Donald Trump, redistricting, voting. And coming back in, Val, we saw one of the Federal Reserve officials talking about the need to handle inflation. And one of the things they keep saying, Val, is that inflation is going out of control. So there are going to have to be some measures taken by the Federal Reserve, maybe increase interest rates. We can't do any of this human infrastructure stuff that's in the Build Back Better because it's going to increase the deficit, which nobody cared about when they gave tax cuts to rich people. We can't sustain or we can't go back to tax rates on richer people because it's going to hurt the economy, so on and so forth. Val, I think that's a veiled, not so veiled, because I think it happens every time Republicans are out of power. Democrats come in, fix the economy, give people more buying power, stabilize people's, situation, bring children out of poverty. And then the Republicans come in and say, we can't do any of that stuff. And prices are going to have to go up and panic everybody. And then we start the whole cycle over again. Is that where we are, Val? Is this whole inflationary talk? Yes, gas is up. Yes, chicken wings cost more money. But is it because of supply and demand, or is there something else going on?
Well, I think Republicans and right-wing fiscal people have taken advantage of a situation that they take advantage of all the time. Sure, I mean, the Fed's going to raise interest rates when it gets to a point that they think they should. But that's separate and apart from Joe Smoke, who runs the corner convenience store, raising the price of his chicken wing. Joe Smoke is not looking to raise his wings based on what the Fed does. That's a whole different thing. And we're talking about gas. There are so many players with their fingers in that gas price that it has nothing to do with inflation. It's not all due to inflation. Well, what they want to do, what they claim to want to do, Ed, with maintaining some type of level playing field here, is make sure that the dollar doesn't become worthless. It doesn't become a kind of thing where it takes $630,000 to buy a loaf of bread. That's the fear that they have. Well, what they're trying to do is to keep things as they are. It means that some CEO makes 640 times the amount of money that the lowest paid worker makes. They want to keep that going. They don't care what that is, whether it's $640 or $640 million. As long as that separation stays there of 640 times whatever the lowest worker makes, because that's what determines our culture. That's what determines who we are, how we do things. That's what makes a yacht more valuable than a rowboat. And so a lot of people who believe in this predatory capitalistic system that we live under, they know things have to stay that way, or people won't want to be millionaires if what they got, everybody else has too. You know, I'll leave you with this one example that I've given before, that when I was teaching, I used to ask some of the students, how would you feel if you woke up one morning and you went out to get the paper in your brand new house with your robe on, and you reached down and you picked up your paper and you looked around and you found out that you're living in a $735,000 home, located very nicely on a half-acre lot, well manicured lawn. You have a 3-car garage with 3 brand new cars in the garage, all paid for. And you're feeling real proud about yourself. You know, your 401k is protected and everything. But when you went out to get that piece of paper, you get the paper, and you look to your left and you look to your right, you saw a bunch of mirrors, because everybody on the block had the same thing. Everybody had the $700,000 house with 3-car garage. Everybody had a brand new car in there. Everybody had the same thing. How would you feel about it then? And most kids would say, well, I don't know about that now. So what that told me, Ed, was that most people don't just want wealth. They want comparative wealth. And an old guy by the name of Howard Hughes, he was a rich guy, said it best before he died. People were asking him about why he had all of these mansions all over the world and that sort of thing. He said, I don't need any of that. He said, I could give all that away tomorrow and live in a tent and be perfectly happy if everybody else were homeless. So he made a point there. It's comparative wealth. So when we look at inflation, the people who are running this and profiting from this, that is the method to keep the people in the $40,000 house where they are, the $740,000 house where they are, and make sure that the two don't meet and there's a big difference and you feel good about what you got when you can look down and not just around and everything's equal.
Right, you have to look down on people. I mean, it's like the rappers who are doing the money thing or at the club and buying all the alcohol or whatever. It's not good enough to go out and have a good time. You have to be ostentatious with it, and that's not just rap. You talk. It's the executive. You know, Jeff Bezos has a yacht for his yacht. He has, his yacht is so big that he has another boat attached to it that he can drop in the water. That's still a yacht class. And on that big boat, he has a helicopter landing pad. So I mean, people could accuse, I guess, us of being jealous of them, Val, because that's the comparative wealth thing, right? They say that, oh, we're knocking them because they've been able to ascend to such a height and have that stuff, but it's not. Jeff Bezos can fly William Shatner to low orbit all he wants to and spend millions of dollars doing it when that money could be placed doing something else. But money is a whole nother thing too. If you read my column from last week, I talk about how much bullshit this all is. I talk about, you know, the price of lard at Piggly Wiggly. Val, if you look at the circular for the week of Thanksgiving, 1957 from Piggly Wiggly, lard cost 19 cents for a 3-pound block of lard. Now, most people don't use lard anymore, but it was really necessary in 1957. You got to fry stuff, you got to make biscuits, all kind of stuff. It was 19 cents. And if you look across the circular, you know, stuff was really cheap. A loaf of bread, 35 cents, whatever. And you look at how inflation over time says that that loaf of bread is $3.50, and that block of lard is probably $4 now instead of 19 cents. What things cost is what we say they cost. What $1 is what the rich people say $1 is, because they have to maintain their status. So if they have to cry inflation, if they have to say they have to raise prices because supply chain issues, if they have to do any of the stuff they say they need to do, they're doing it because they want to keep you trapped where you are. And that's the bottom line. So we'll put a pin in it there. The other thing I want to talk about, Val, before we run out of time in this hour is the lieutenant governor of North Carolina. And I want to be as polite as possible. I'm not going to make jokes about him and whatever, being a storefront preacher or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Let's just take a clip, look at a clip.
I've heard a whole lot of people in here talking tonight about this group and that group, and domestic violence, and blacks, these minorities and that minority. What I want to know is, when are you all going to start standing up for the majority? And Aunt Jemima being removed from the box, Uncle Ben being removed from the box, people being canceled from our society over something they said 13 years ago. It is outrageous. Meanwhile, look at what they promote. The number one song in the nation. Can't even say the name.
That's right.
And if you can read the lyrics all the way through without losing your lunch, I'll give you $5. Filth. They are promoting our children filth. Look at what they're doing in school. 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old children sitting in school and teachers are saying, you're not really a boy, are you? Now you gotta wonder whether or not you're a boy. Teaching our children about transgenderism and homosexuality and adult propositions that have no place in a classroom.
So, Val, the lieutenant governor finds himself in a little bit of trouble because he goes to a church and he says that homosexuality is filthy. Now, that's just one of many things that he said, but that's the big thing this week. He says something every week. And if we had a tracker on Lieutenant Governor Robinson, we could find something every week where he says something unhinged. And he started his career, Val, speaking at school at Guilford County board meetings because he said that their guns were being taken away. Now, Guilford County board was not trying to take away anybody's guns, but he would go to these meetings and he became kind of famous amongst the right wing. He uses that fame and decides he's going to run for lieutenant governor, and he beats a very capable candidate who should be lieutenant governor now, Representative Hawley, who had been in the North Carolina General Assembly a long time. And he has no political experience. He doesn't even talk about anything in terms of policy other than guns and gay people. That's all I can really find since he's been lieutenant governor. Val, explain to me how somebody like Robinson becomes lieutenant governor in North Carolina. And then is there anything we can do about it, or does he just sit there for the next couple of years being crazy until he's, hopefully voted out of office?
Well, there's a lot of Lieutenant Governor Robinsons around the country right now. It seems that the GOP has found them a new play toy. They can run a right winger for governor while at the same time find a black conservative to run for lieutenant governor. And they think they're doing pretty well now because there's a certain amount of black voters who will vote race only and not care about anything else. So they figure this guy's going to get a lot of votes just because he's black. And he's going to get a lot of votes from so-called white moderates who will say that they didn't vote for the GOP because they thought the GOP was being too racist. Now this lets them off the hook for that. Maybe they're not being that racist if they're running a black guy for lieutenant governor. But at any rate, there's a calling time coming up, Ed. And what that is when, and take here in North Carolina for an example, Roy Cooper cannot run for re-election in 2024 because of the state constitution. And because he can't run, that means that under normal circumstances, the lieutenant governor, who would be of the same party, would run. That's not the case here. So the question becomes, who does the GOP put up to run for governor? My money says I'm voting for the field, that it will be anybody but Robinson. And that'll show him and others like him at that point that, hey, buddy, you're just being used. They have no intent of allowing you to run for governor of North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
They know you can't win, and they don't want to blow this opportunity to take the governorship back again. So he'll be cast aside. He'll be talking about how terribly wrong they've treated him, badly they've treated him, but that's the way it's going to be. But we see this happen, replicated all over the country, Ed. A lot of Black conservatives running for lieutenant governor, and now they're running for other positions, such as your friend, Herschel Walker.
Yeah, well, we're going to deal with him in the coming weeks because I mean that presents a very big problem for Georgia if he ends up being elected. I don't know. I'm really scared of that for a lot of reasons. So these Black conservatives who eventually run for other offices, and like you said, Val, don't get the support that they thought they should have gotten. They either just fade away. They never come out and say how bad they were used. I mean, like we've talked about this before. Herman Cain went to his grave because of them, and they don't even speak his name. So I guess it doesn't matter. He can't hear it now, but they didn't have any real love for him. They used him, and they will use Lieutenant Governor Robinson. Val, we're quickly running out of time. There was one other story in the news that I want to talk about just really quick. Down in Texas, it seems like we're talking about Texas every week too, but there's a town called South Lake. Let me play a clip real quick and then we'll talk about it.
The district already in the spotlight after parents clashed over its diversity plan, now facing new pushback over which books are allowed in their libraries, with some teachers placing caution tape over bookshelves, calling the move censorship. It all started when a fourth grade teacher was reprimanded after a parent complained about her having a book about anti-racism.
I couldn't believe it. She's the kind of teacher that we would hope the district would be trying to attract.
The district sent educators new guidance to vet all books, instructing them to not allow singular perspectives that could be considered offensive. This coming after Texas passed a law banning the teaching of concepts that could make individuals feel guilt or anguish due to their race. NBC News obtained exclusive, secretly recorded audio of a school training.
We are in the middle of a political mess.
The director of curriculum, Gina Petty, offers an example for teachers: balance books about the Holocaust with an opposing view.
Make sure that if you have a book on the Holocaust, that you have one that has other.
How do you oppose the Holocaust?
So Val, as we've been talking about, the GOP strategy is one to make everybody scared of stuff like critical race theory and so on and so forth, cast doubt on the integrity of elections, say that the economy is in a tailspin even when it's not, but you make it sound like it is. Talk about spending, that the Democrats are taxing spend, whatever. Down in this South Lake, Texas, you got a school district who says that you should balance both sides of historical events. In this case, they talk specifically about the Holocaust. I don't know how the hell you balance that. But if you extend this and you say you want to balance, talk about slavery, how does that happen? What's going on in South Lake? But it's not just South Lake. There are communities in Johnston County and school board, the Harnett County School Board, where these same kind of people are showing up demanding the same thing. What's going on with this pounding on critical race theory and trying to take books out of schools?
They're trying to save little Johnny and little Becky from the horrible truth because they don't teach this stuff at home. They don't talk about it at the dinner table. They don't talk about it in the backyard when you're running around. And now Johnny and Becky are exposed to something in school that they never knew existed because mom and daddy didn't tell them anything about it. So mom and daddy now got to figure out, how do we react to this? What do we tell these kids now? So the best thing to do is, well, let's stop the schools from telling them about it. Let's make the schools treat them like we treat them. Keep the bad news away and just tell them that they are great and everything they've done has always been great. And they are God's chosen people and there's nothing they can do wrong. And they own this planet and this universe. That's not going to work, obviously. But that's the motivation that they have. That's why they're doing this kind of thing. They're trying to protect Johnny and Becky from the truth.
Yeah, and Johnny and Becky grew up to be Karen and Ken and harass Black folks when they're trying to have a cookout in the park. Val, we're at the end of this thing, so tell me something good I need to know, or tell me something I need to look forward to.
Well, tomorrow we have Derek Boyens on our show, Connections, and he's going to talk a little bit about voting and elections and rules and laws and those kinds of things. People need to listen to that, a little education for them. And in the coming weeks, we'll be talking more about redistricting and voting because the election is coming up real soon. In our show coming up on the 14th of November, I believe it is. I'm not looking at a calendar right now, but our first show after Halloween, we'll be giving a roundup of what the November the 2nd election looked like and what it portends for 2022 and 2024.
All right. Yeah, we need to stay on top of that. Hey, everybody, you've been in with us. We talked about a bunch of stuff. Go out. If you haven't read my column about the lard prices at Piggly Wiggly, go read that. That's on the deal at edclark.com. My new piece will be out Sunday. So tomorrow it's about Jon Gruden, but it's also more about athletics and Black athletes' relationships with white coaches. So take a look at that. That's on the deal with edclark.com. And we're going to be back next week. I'm working on trying to get somebody in here to talk about how taxes adversely affect poor folks, but a lot of Black folks. If you don't know, the people who get audited the most are not rich people. It's people who got stuff like the earned income tax credit, or people who live in certain zip codes. We want to talk about that next week. So I got a guest that I'm trying to get on to talk about that because I think it's extremely important because we're getting towards the end of the year and you'll be doing your taxes soon. So we want to talk about that. So in the meantime, go out and do something good for somebody today, and we'll see you next Saturday. Thanks for watching The Deal. Bye.
We're cold, we're cold, we're cold, we're cold, we're cold.
By what Gruden said and that he said it, but more that I know that he is very popular. People like him. He's kind of known in the business, guy's guy, and the owner likes him a lot.